Welcome to building out a project schedule. I'll be facilitating. I'm Andrew Baldwin. If you had to listen to me talk yesterday, I'm sorry, but I'm back again. With us today, we have Kirby Fell, which he's an IT director at Fallback Union Elementary School District. You guys heard him this morning in a very awesome session. We also have Natalie. I don't know how to pronounce your last name, Natalie. I'm sorry, I should have asked that ahead of time. But
Kokerlik.
Okay, Natalie's here. She's a network systems. You want to tell me, Natalie? I forgot it already.
Network and system specialist.
Right, we're going to keep it real organic today. She's over at Solana Beach School District. So you're mainly going to be listening to them today and their real life experiences applying project management at their districts. So they are not project management experts, or at least they weren't before our academy. They're not project managers, at least as far as job title goes. So you're really going to hear some real life experience and not so much, not the theoretical perfect world stuff that we like to talk about from our side. So diving right in, I'm going to hand it over to, actually, I'm sorry. If you guys have questions throughout this session, we're going to try to get to them. I'm not sure if we'll have time, but we're going to do our best. If you have questions, just throw them in the chat. And I'll give you guys a sneak heads up. We are doing a breakout session, so there will be some discussion. So if you can, turn on your cameras and be ready to participate for just a little bit. It's not going to be too long. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to you, Kirby.
All right, sounds good. Well, good morning, almost afternoon, everyone. Andrew, thank you for bringing your mad DJ skills to the conference. I'm sure we've all been kind of transported back in time a little bit after listening to those songs. All right, so we are going to hop into our discussion about how to build a schedule and some things to take into consideration when doing so, and some tools that might be helpful as well. So let's start by talking about some of the scheduling considerations. One of the biggest ones right off the bat, what is the scope of the project? You really want to make sure that that's clearly defined for your project. Andrew had a great session yesterday where he talked about scope creep. It's very, very easy to allow other things to sort of creep into your project. So I think having that very, very clearly defined from the get-go will be really helpful. Also, who is involved? I shared just a little bit this morning about a project that I worked on recently where I didn't necessarily engage a vendor in that scheduling process. And so that's a really key component to consider. Also, again, thinking about that target completion date and really sort of reverse planning back from when you want the project to be completed. It's also good to kind of break your project down into specific phases. For example, some of the phases that you might want to consider having a planning and discovery phase where you're really talking about what all needs to be included in the project. Then kind of moving into a design and build phase where you're really building out the solution for your project. Testing is a big one, especially if it's something related to data. Obviously, you'll want adequate time to be able to test everything before going live. And then the implementation phase. This is probably where you'll spend the bulk of your time during a project. It's also a great idea to have that post-implementation phase where you can really discuss with your team how did the project go and what were some of the takeaways, some of the lessons learned throughout the project. And then lastly, it's really important to have that closure and celebration phase, just giving everyone an opportunity to really celebrate all of the efforts that went into making the project a success. It's important to create tasks under each one of those phases as well, and really kind of focus on who's going to be responsible for those tasks. Again, I talked about this a little bit in my morning session, making sure that you're evaluating existing workloads as well. It's really easy to think, okay, we can accomplish this in 3-4 weeks without evaluating what others might have going on during that time frame as well. Availability of resources. I think we all experienced this during COVID. I know we certainly did here in Fallbrook, where things that were typically readily available, like Chromebooks, hotspots, monitors, computer monitors, all of a sudden those things were very, very hard to find. And not just physical resources, but also looking at your resources in terms of budget and people power to make the project happen. And then also just evaluating any of your approvals that need to take place during the process as well. You may have board approval that you'll need to seek approval from your cabinet members. If it's an E-rate funded project, for those of you that have gone through that process, that is a rather lengthy and complicated process. So just making sure that you're allowing enough time for that to happen as well. All right, moving on, we want to just share a little bit about where to begin. Let me see if I can slide over here. So again, really starting with that idea of starting with the end in mind. What is it that you want to accomplish and when does it need to be accomplished by? And then starting to sort of reverse plan backwards from there to make sure that you have a well thought out and well designed project plan. Choosing a user-friendly scheduling tool. If you were in the morning session, shared a little bit about this as well. There are lots of free tools out there, but if you can swing it, adopting one of the subscription options that's out there that really brings some additional functionality in that can help you be very efficient with your project is always a big plus. Building in that extra time for those unforeseen roadblocks. Boy, I've not worked on a project yet that we didn't have some sort of unforeseen thing come up. So being able to build in that extra time, preferably in each phase of your project, will just help you kind of keep on track and hopefully lead to a successful project. Planning those regular check-in meetings as well. It's a great idea to just make sure that your project team is informed along the way. You may have that core group that you're working on throughout the project. That's really, your team members doing the actual work, but you may have other stakeholders and sponsors that you'll want to include in some of those regular check-in meetings as well, just so they're aware of what's going on with the project. And again, including any of those outside vendors as you're developing that schedule. That will just help you avoid some pitfalls with their schedules and what they may have on their plate as well. And then lastly, assigning owners to tasks. If you're the PM, it's very easy to kind of fall into that habit or routine of wanting to take on all of the tasks yourself. Spread that out amongst your team members. I also think it gives them buy-in and gives them some ownership in the project as well. So let's talk a little bit about effective scheduling tools. These are just a few of the tools that we looked into when we were thinking of adopting a scheduling tool to help us manage projects here in Fallbrook. Some of the considerations that we thought about during the process, obviously the big one, what's the cost? Making sure that it's easy to use for all of your users as well, and that even your outside vendors, outside contractors that you may be working with, that those folks will have visibility into that scheduling board as well. Being able to set permissions for different users is also a big plus. You may have some folks that you want to allow view-only access, but not necessarily have those folks be able to edit some of the items. Yes, Andrew, I agree. Like Rick said yesterday, you don't have to be a superhero, even if you're the PM. Let's see. Being able to assign tasks and due dates to the different phases of your project, that's really helpful as well. And again, if there's some sort of built-in notification system that can kind of help you keep track of when some of those due dates or tasks are coming due. Being able to monitor your progress as well as you move throughout the project. It's really nice if there's some sort of built-in component to your solution that will help you, add notes and be able to just have an eye on progress for all of your team members. Also, the ability to have those effective communication tools. I shared a little bit about Monday.com and kind of what's built into that particular solution. There are others out there that have really great communication pieces built in as well. But again, it's one more tool that you can use to really keep everyone on track and aware of what's happening with your project. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and turn it back over to Andrew.
Oh, why? 2 years and I still don't know how to unmute myself. I want to say thank you, by the way, to Matt Nichols. He's in the background. He's supporting us and making sure our breakouts go smoothly. So hopefully he's ready to fire him up. But we're going to see you guys into a breakout discussion for about 10 minutes. And we just want you to talk about these 3 items, which is what issues have you experienced in project schedules in the past? What sort of things have caused delays or problems? And were you able to resolve the issues? And if so, how? Really just so we can all gain from each other's collective experience of just what things have derailed your projects and things you forgot to think about, things like that. You don't have to talk for too long. Again, it's 10 minutes, 6 people. It's like 1:20 per person. And I said this in my breakouts yesterday, so you'll laugh to hear me. You'll laugh if you hear me say this again. Just break the ice, jump in, be the first person to talk. Don't stare at each other for 2 minutes before somebody decides to break the silence. Just dive in, be a champion. So with my whole spiel, Matt, if we're ready, we can fire it off, and then we'll ask 1 or 2 groups to share out. So pick somebody to share out on your behalf. All right, so I think we've got everybody back. I hope your breakouts discussions, for those of you that had breakouts that worked, I hope the discussion was useful and engaging. Can I have 2 groups raise their hand and share out what happened in your group and kind of what the takeaways were? I will call on somebody randomly if I don't get any hands. All right, Leon, tell us about it. Thank you.
So our group, we talked about various things. We all have, it seems like, different roles, but what we came up with were issues that break down really just to communication. As we talked about, there's times when, you don't have that piece that you thought you were going to have, and things that are quote unquote ready for testing, they come back and they don't have the requirements, so then therefore you got additional testing, so it has to go back a second pass for programming to get involved. Or just with projects where an installation for technology was put in, but they didn't consider the standard to which it should have been applied. So all these issues come down to communication breakdowns. And also, we also talked about how you have to consider and give more time for issues like this, where you know you're going to have this problem that appears that you just have to just kind of work through. So as part of the charter, you have to build in a time frame that considers issues that you come across in the project. So that's kind of some of the things we talked about in our group.
That was awesome. Thank you. I mean, just that identifying that scheduling issues really come down to breakdown in communication very, very often. And it for somebody like me, I'm very action oriented, so spending a lot of time on communication is not something I love, but it really is. The good communication sets up a foundation for the rest of the project to be successful. So thank you for that insight. And then Ryan, if you could share out real quick, and then we'll move on.
Yeah, just real quick. Our discussion was really about tools, adoption of the right management tool, what that looks like, regardless of size, and just the challenges for even internally within small or large districts, getting all the internal departments to agree that this is the platform or the tools we're going to use to manage a project. No elegant solutions out there, just trying to get that. And I guess it's tangentially related to communication, but getting everybody on board that they're going to accept that this is what we're going to use.
Totally agree. Most of the time, tools aren't going to solve your problems if you have foundational issues, but the tools make your problems a lot easier to deal with if you have the right tools and people are using them correctly. So thanks for sharing that. We're going to jump into the second half of our presentation piece, and Natalie's going to talk to us about schedule pitfalls and how to get back on track when the pitfalls have been realized and you're kind of in the pit. You don't just have to live with it. You can kind of try to straighten the course. So Natalie, if you want to take control, go for it.
All right, thank you. Can everyone hear me?
Yep.
All right. So we're going to talk about schedule pitfalls and getting back on track. So some examples of schedule pitfalls that may affect the schedule of a project: a board and/or cabinet approval, not planning enough time for these various approvals. With most large projects, districts need different levels of approvals, and possibly even outside vendor approval or county approval, depending on the scope of the project. And if one of these steps is not planned into a schedule, it could cause a delay. The start of the school year, as we all know, the start of the school year is a hectic time. Things can pop up unexpectedly, plans change, and this could cause your schedule to get off track. Testing insufficient time allotted, meaning testing of the end product or the process or the plan that you are working around during your project. Planning time for testing and or piloting is important, as this could change your schedule if the result is not what you expected it to be. Not building in buffer time. Buffer time should be built in for emergencies and unforeseen issues. Having buffer time, this allows for flexibility and unforeseen circumstances. Spring break, or really any break during the school year, this can cause disruption of the schedule. Staff are off for vacations. Unplanned tasks come up during breaks, so we need to take these breaks into consideration when planning the schedule for a project. Summer break ending, so staff leaving for the summer, schools closing or opening, staff coming back. These are all things that need to be considered. The current workload of the staff. Staff will have other items that they're working on, and this can cause a project to stall or the schedule to get compromised. Including all vendors in scheduling. When creating the schedule, we need to try and include all vendors so everyone has input and can plan together. There may be issues or scheduling restrictions that need to be taken into account for everyone involved. A purchasing freeze. Districts could have a purchasing freeze. This can affect ordering and the supplies or materials being delivered on time. Communication, which we've all noted is a very big one. Forgetting key groups. There are many different levels of groups and people that need to be included in communication, starting with the board to cabinet, leadership, the end users, employees in general. And forgetting one of these groups or missing an important communication could cause a schedule. Staffing changes. When staff leave or change positions, they take the knowledge and background with them. And trying to catch up new staff on a project could cause the schedule to be delayed. Procurement issues. Supply issues can arise. This causes delays in consecutive steps or tasks in the project. This may mean having to change your plans, adjust the schedule, or change what your plan was if unforeseen procurement issues come up. Okay, sorry. Chain reaction of issues. If one thing goes wrong, the entire schedule is thrown off, and you need to look ahead so you can plan what will be affected and how you need to change your schedule. I know when we were doing our device refresh last year, we had to start the whole project earlier than we normally would in previous years because of COVID and procurement issues. So you just need to know that one thing going wrong could cause a chain of reaction to your schedule and looking ahead. So those are some examples of schedule pitfalls. Another one that's not on here is the current workload, is one of the biggest pitfalls, just knowing that we need to plan the schedule and that all staff has other things on their plate. So moving ahead. So how do we avoid these schedule pitfalls? What can we do? How can we prepare better? Controlling the scope. Controlling the scope is key to keeping a project schedule and costs on track. Creating an attainable scope, defining the requirements, creating good estimates, and monitoring external influences can help to get your project on track. Divide work into pieces or smaller tasks. For larger projects, breaking down the project into several pieces or tasks can help to avoid a pitfall. A tool that can be used for this is work breakdown structure. This encompasses all aspects of the project, including the person or the team responsible for the component, breaks down the project into smaller components, making it less overwhelming. Define clear and realistic objectives and expectations for all. Same idea as controlling the scope. Make goals and tasks realistic, attainable, and manageable. Working together with the team to create these objectives and expectations can help so that all input is considered and the project team can work to stay on schedule. Invite project executives, customers, and end users to share ideas and feedback. Hearing the feedback and ideas and thoughts from all involved can help to create the schedule and help to know that it will be followed. Everyone has different ideas, and working together as a team will create the best schedule for the project. Include project team in schedule creation. When you schedule in isolation, you don't have all the facts. You need to hear everyone's opinions, how long they will need for their tasks, their schedule restrictions. Building a schedule alone does not allow for this, so teamwork will make the entire team accountable for their schedule. Also, plan to meet regularly with the team. Include sufficient schedule contingency time. Accounting for delays and unforeseen issues, larger, more complex projects require more contingency time. Contingency time should not be built into every task, but more kept as a reserve and to use as needed. We know that if we give people that extra time, they're going to use it, and that's not the idea. And set clear job roles and define responsibilities. Be specific and detailed as possible. This allows for team members to know what is expected of them and stick to a schedule. So how do we get this schedule back on track? What are some steps we can take? Assess the situation. Gather project team to do a deep dive look at the project. Consider what the pitfalls are. How can the team get them back on track? Looking at the project from all angles and with all members allows for different feedback and ideas. Use the resources available. Reach out to departments or teams of past successful projects. Utilizing different departments, staff, or the knowledge of these resources can help get a project back on track. Also, asking project team members of past successful projects for help can give the team ideas. Reevaluate the tasks remaining, take appropriate steps. Look at the tasks not completed in the project and figure out how you can get them back on track. What steps need to be taken? Sometimes reducing the scope is possible to correct the schedule or adjusting the project plan if there are concurrent phases. It's not always an option and must be done with caution. If phases are predictive of one another, such as phase 1 must be completed before phase 2, this can introduce risk, cost, and the project can become more complex. Consider the triple constraints, cost, time, and scope, that were addressed yesterday. Reducing time or correcting the schedule will likely increase costs or require a reduced scope. These triple constraints are important as one will affect the other. Lastly, have a conversation with the sponsor. Be timely and truthful. If delays will affect the completion date, inform your sponsor as early as possible. Be honest, prepared, and have a plan. Letting the sponsor know and working together as a team to adjust the schedule will help to get your project back on track. So I'm going to turn it over to Kirby for some key takeaways.
Hey, Kirby, you're muted.
Thank you. To Andrew's point earlier, as many times as I've done this, I still forget to unmute every now and then. So we just wanted to share some of the key takeaways from our session today. Involve all stakeholders. That's a really important piece just to make sure that everyone is involved in the scheduling process. Obviously, they will be involved in your project at some point, but really including them in the scheduling process up front will help just avoid some pitfalls if you reach their portion of the project and maybe they have other things going on and aren't prepared to be able to complete the work in the time allotted. Avoiding that schedule or that scope creep. I know we've talked about this several times throughout the conference, but that is a really important piece just to make sure that things stay on track, that you stick to your budget, and that you don't allow other things to creep into your project that could affect the overall success. Building in that extra time, as Natalie pointed out, not something that you necessarily need to do or should do at the task level, but you certainly want to build in that buffer either within your particular phases of the project or just within your project overall. Jamie, I just wanted to highlight a point that I think Jamie Brown made in the chat. That global pandemic, that's something that none of us saw coming, and obviously it had a huge impact on our projects, for some to the point that it actually, stopped forward progress with the project. And then again, using that scheduling tool, if you can go with something that has all the bells and whistles that will help you be as efficient as possible, that's awesome. If not, there's tons of templates out there for Google Sheets and Microsoft Excel that will at least get you started with a nice tool that you can use to build out your schedule. Meeting regularly, again, not only with your immediate project team, but also having those meetings with your stakeholders, with your sponsors, and again, communicating often with everyone involved. As Natalie mentioned, if you do have a situation where things aren't going as planned, just being very upfront and honest with your project sponsors about what's happening. Hopefully those project sponsors will be able to provide some additional support to help you really get things moving in the right direction again. So with that, I'll go ahead and turn it back over to Andrew. I think we've been answering most of the questions in the chat, but we'll just do a quick check-in to see if we have any additional questions from folks today.
Here's a good one for both of you guys. How do you manage scope creep when the border cabinet is asking for more? And I'm happy to chime in on that too, but I do want to hear what you guys got to say.
Sure, I'll go ahead and chime in first. I think, again, having that very clearly defined project charter, a very clearly defined project schedule, those are tools that you can use as part of that conversation to say, if we include this extra element, it will have an impact on the project. It could potentially delay the project. It could end up costing more, if it's something that you have a specific budget for, and also providing some options for, maybe that's a follow-up project, or maybe that's something that can be addressed after the main project has been completed, and really evaluating, whether or not it makes sense to add something additional to the project.
Yeah, I think Kirby said it all. could just add that just knowing ahead of time that you may have to be flexible, that, historically the board or cabinet, there's always something more that can be asked. So just knowing that it could change and providing them options, or, looking at ways to achieve what they're asking.
Yeah, you guys said it all. I don't have anything to add on that, except if you weren't in my session yesterday when I talked about scope creep, I suggest you hop onto the Padlet board. Down there, you'll find a 12-minute clip from Pentagon Wars, which is scope creep in action, and it's a pretty entertaining clip, but it really is such an accurate point of, like, this is how it starts to get out of control, and the end product is a completely different thing. That it's a great product, but that wasn't what we set out to achieve in any way. So I can't think of a better example than watching that to see how it just starts to spiral out of control, and the project takes 4 years longer than it should have, that kind of thing. But really, it is just saying, sure, we can do that, but these are the consequences. I think that's one of the biggest points, is being flexible, but there are consequences to that. I've got another question for you guys. Should we keep extra contingency time in our back pocket, as in build a schedule to keep staff tasks on an ideal schedule to keep focus in place, but then keep a separate independent schedule as a fail-safe? That's a kind of advanced question. If you guys want to dive in, I go for it. If not, I can start talking about it. I'll say, if you want to be perfect as far as PMI is concerned, you create a schedule baseline at the beginning, and then as your schedule starts to fall apart, because things are going to change, You keep that baseline, and then you measure where you're at now. Your real schedule, it starts to change and go over here, but you keep that baseline so that you can compare and see the impact. And if you have to be accountable to your board, why did you take so much longer than you said you were? You can show them, here's the baseline, here's our plan, and then here's where you asked us to start changing features, and the schedule went over here. So that's one possibility as far as that's more about the baseline. When you're talking about contingency time, I would say keep your contingency time as a separate pocket. So like Natalie was saying, don't pad every task by a day, because if you tell staff if they have a week, then they're going to take a week. They're going to use your contingency time completely. Keep it as a separate budget, so the whole phase of the project has an extra 3 weeks of contingency, and then take that and apply it as needed. That's one way you can carefully use it, and kind of don't let anybody know you have it. I don't know if you guys had something to add on to that. It was a pretty big question. It's a great question, though.
Andrew, I think you captured everything that I was thinking about.
Yep.
Do we use other modules of Monday.com? I couldn't say it. I'm actually not. I use Monday a ton, but I'm not one of our Monday real experts. We do have dashboard rollups, so all of our big projects are in a certain format so that they roll up to our CTO, and he gets a big dashboard of the entire status of the division, basically. We do use some automation. So Monday has some kind of Boolean variable type automation where you can say, if this happens, then this happens. So if I create a project, then it automatically gets assigned to me, or things like that. So automation is pretty cool, does a lot of stuff. But really there's so much more that we don't use, and we're only dipping our toes. And then templates are another big thing we're just starting to get into. I can't offer any more than that though, because I haven't used them.
Yeah, I'll chime in just a little bit on that one as well. We are definitely, taking a look at some of the built-in templates and starting to figure out how we might be able to use those. We are fairly new to Monday.com. We've only been using it for a couple of months, but we are continuing to discover, other wonderful features built into the product, and just, kind of having those aha moments of, wow, we could use it for this. One of the things that I talked about in my session this morning, we're looking at possibly using one of the components of Monday.com to have folks request, certain projects. So if they have a project that needs to be completed at a particular school site, this often comes up with facilities, for example, maybe using some of the, built-in features, request features, to actually submit those requests to the correct department. And also just using, some of the calendaring features to just schedule out things that, are reoccurring throughout the year or that happen every year, such as, data submissions that we need to make to the state and federal level, being able to really schedule those out so we can kind of get that at a glance picture of, who's working on what when. That really helps us schedule times for other projects. If we can see that, maybe our data specialist is knee deep in, fall 1 CalPADS reporting, in October through December, that might be a time that we really don't want to impact that person with a particular project that we're working on.
I wanted to point out Cedro's question about why we chose Monday over other products. We're actually going to answer that question on the bulletin board later because somebody else asked it. It is a good question. If I remember right, we had an entire thing about that, about doing discovery and all that. So we'll share more about that once I have time to find out where all that information is at. Great question from Ryan. What process do you use to amend a project charter if the need arises?
Yeah, I think for us, we really consider that project charter to be sort of a document in time. So I don't necessarily know that, or haven't experienced a situation where we would need to go back and amend the charter, but we definitely, make note of any changes through our project schedule and our biweekly meetings that we have, with our project team, or weekly meetings, whatever your schedule is. For example, we did have some staffing changes, some folks that were in our district when we originally started our HRSys integration project, moved on during the process or, had to go out on a leave of absence. And so we didn't necessarily go back to the project charter document and update, the team members involved. We just kind of made note of it in our biweekly status meetings and our biweekly status reports.
Yeah, I would agree with Kirby that the project charter is a document in time and we don't really update it once it's been created, but updating the schedule and the project team, and then also, any stakeholders that may need to be communicated with regarding the change that's happening.
And I'll just add a little tweak on that. What you guys are saying is definitely, in my opinion, the correct way of doing it. We do fudge it a little because we have some people that all we can do is get them to use the charter. They don't use anything else from the project management kit. The charter is enough for them. That's the best they can do, and that's fine. In those cases, the charter is really more like a project plan for them. So it's a little more thorough, and it might be a little bit more of a living document, but you would want to separate what your baseline was from what your additional changes were, just like you guys are saying. We're kind of fudging how you're really supposed to do PM, but it's really about what works for them and what gets them using something. We're over time, but I do want to address one last question, which is a great question. I can tell you're paying attention. How do you not share contingency time when you publish the schedule? That's a great point. You kind of have to play that by ear based on your teams, your politics, all of that fun stuff. If you have teams that you can trust are only going to focus on their piece, they're not going to abuse your contingency time, you can share it with them. One thing that we usually do is, date range is very common, or it depends on the size of the project, but we might pad the end of our phases. So our closure phase, it might only take like 2 days, but we might pad it to take a month, just because that's our catch-up time if we need it. I have a project right now that is going way over schedule because of their discovery is just taking forever. So we're chewing up closure time that we had planned on closure. We're chewing that up at the planning phase. It's not specifically booked as contingency publicly, but that's what it's turning into. That's one way to do it, but it really does take a little bit, I think, of political savvy and kind of finesse on how you should apply that. I'll close it out here. We had some great questions, great engagement, but I don't want to go over schedule. So if you have more questions, throw them up on the bulletin board. We are going to actively go after those. And I just want to say thank you to Kirby and Natalie. You guys are fantastic. I skipped our Q&A slide, so we did that. And we have our email addresses here if you guys want to grab, shoot us questions, or again, just post them up on the bulletin board. With that, I hope you guys enjoy your lunch
attending our session today.
Thank you.
Sorry, Andrew.
Hop over to the lunch session. We have the Ask the EPMO where you can just hear us chat and eat, or talk to Monday.com or Infotech, both amazing resources and great vendors. All right, guys, have a great lunch.